All right, welcome. Today we're diving into this really fascinating corner of history content that's just blowing up online. It's all about the stories that weren't just forgotten, they were actively erased. We're going to break down exactly why these kinds of dark, dramatic stories have such a powerful grip on us.
So let's just start with this question, right? Have you ever found yourself completely drawn to the tragic, the grim, the forgotten parts of history? Why is that? What is it about these tough stories that pulls us in so deep? That's really the core question we're digging into today.
Well, it turns out this genre actually has a name. It's called the dark historical narrative. And it really zeroes in on three key things. Tragedy, for sure, but also the incredible spiritual resilience of people. You know, how they find strength and stay human in the face of the unthinkable. And maybe the most important part, it's all about those erased records, the stories that were deliberately scrubbed from the official history book. Okay, so what is it that makes these narratives so compelling? It really comes down to this potent mix of education and just raw human drama. Yeah, think about it like this. You know, traditional history, it often gives us the what, the empires, the dates, the big conflicts. But what these dark historical narratives do is fill in this huge gap by giving us the who. It focuses on the resilience, the personal tragedy, and those suppressed voices behind all the big events. It turns abstract history into something that feels deeply, deeply personal. And when you break down the appeal, it's actually really interesting. Look at this. It's an almost perfect balance. You've got 40%, that's the thrill of uncovering these hidden truths. Another 40% is that gripping human drama. And it's all anchored by 20% of solid historical context. It's this exact recipe that makes the whole experience so immersive. But, you know, it goes deeper than just the drama. There's a real mission at the heart of this whole genre. It's all about reclaiming the narrative and asking a really fundamental question. Who actually gets to tell their story?
And that's because the focus here isn't on the victors, the kings or the generals. It's intentionally on the stories of marginalized groups whose voices were suppressed by dominant empires. It's about actively trying to correct the historical record.
So where do you even find these stories? Well, a lot of the time, it's in the most volatile, the most grim corners of the past. Think about historical frontiers, like the centuries-long clashes between the Ottoman and Byzantine spheres. These were flashpoints where cultures collided and just countless personal stories got lost in the chaos of conquest.
And to make this totally real, let's just look at a number, 22. On its own, it's nothing, right? Just a number on a screen. But in one of these narratives, it represents a specific, deeply researched story of 22 nuns whose convent was completely destroyed during one of these conflicts. By focusing on a single, tangible human story like that, the whole abstract idea of suppressed voices suddenly becomes this powerful, unforgettable narrative we can actually connect with.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly compelling, but there's a huge question, right? How do these storytellers actually establish credibility? How do they make us believe these erased histories are real? Well, the answer lies in a kind of historical archaeology. See, the authority is built piece by piece by digging through sources that exist way outside the mainstream story. We're talking about citing personal letters from missionaries, uncovering forgotten reports from the Vatican, or analyzing these tiny details buried deep within Ottoman state archives. Every single source is presented like a piece of a puzzle that you're solving right alongside the creator. And this brings us to a really crucial point. The feeling of discovery is just as important as the information itself. When you frame these sources as uncovered or buried, it gives them this immense power. It makes us, the audience, feel like we're part of a revelation, like we're witnessing hidden truths finally being brought into the light. All right, so let's tie this all together. What does the popularity of these dark narratives really tell us about how we relate to the past today? Because it's about so much more than just entertainment. It's about listening. So just to recap the anatomy of this genre, it really comes down to four key things. First, it finds its power in the grim, challenging parts of history, the parts that official records tend to sanitize. Second, it masterfully blends education with that emotional drama, making the past feel incredibly present. Third, it makes a point to champion the stories of the forgotten. And finally, it builds its authority on a foundation of uncovered archival sources, which makes us feel like investigators. And ultimately, that's the real appeal, isn't it? These narratives change our role. They turn us from just passive viewers into active investigators, digging for buried truths.
We're not just consuming facts from a textbook anymore. We're piecing together clues. And that satisfies this deep need for a more complete, more honest picture of our shared past.
And that leaves us with one last thought to chew on. If these stories were hidden in plain sight, just waiting for someone to look, what other echoes from history are still out there, just waiting to be heard?